I hear any lip in the comment section, you're all looking for a right smack bottom. So I kind of want to revisit Twice Upon a Time a little bit, and one specific aspect of it in particular, and that is the depiction of the First Doctor as played by David Bradley. Now, I really only talked about him in a positive context when I did my actual review of Twice Upon a Time, because I think he plays the part very well. I think he exudes a lot of the same energy that William Hartnell brought to the part. He obviously looks the part really well. He's got the delivery down. And I actually didn't even mention this. I love his moment with Bill saying why he left Gallifrey in the first place. I love all of that. However, this has become a bit of a contentious point, specifically with people who know the First Doctor, frankly, a little better than I do, or much better than I do in some cases, really taking issue, not necessarily with his performance, but with the way the character is written, specifically in regards to the way he treats Bill and basically the misogynistic aspects of the character. So, again, keep in mind, I am not, even though I'm starting to catch up on classic Doctor Who, I am not as steeped in this stuff as a lot of other fans are. And I think that's probably part of the reason that, yeah, I noticed it, but it didn't register to the degree with me that it did, I think, with fans who know classic and know First Doctor stuff in particular better than I do. And there's kind of been a bit of backlash. And I've seen some of this in my own comment section where people sort of claiming that, like, the Doctor was never anything like this. William Hartnell did not play the Doctor this way. This is a complete disrespect of the First Doctor. This was atrocious. How dare Moffat do this? Whereas for me, and I think honestly probably most New Who fans, we just didn't notice it at all, or made some degree of assumption of, well, show was made in the 60s. He probably was, wasn't he? So I want to dig into this a little bit more. Now, this is by no means comprehensive, but the first thing I do want to address is that, as I said, I've seen it come up in my comment section. I've even seen the arguments made elsewhere, you know, that the First Doctor was not misogynistic in any way. Now, again, I don't know William Hartnell's whole run. I only know a handful of it here and there. But I can give you an example right from the very first episode where, I'm sorry, he kind of was. During An Unearthly Child, very first episode ever broadcast, Ian and Barbara, the two school teachers who Susan is their student, and they think something's weird with this girl, so they've followed her to this junkyard. They've seen her go into the police box. They're trying to figure out what's going on, or they thought they saw her go there. They're trying to figure out what is going on here. And they run into the Doctor and they start questioning him. And I went back and re-looked at this scene again. And there were a couple things I noticed. When Barbara suggests that she saw Susan go into the police box, the Doctor is incredibly dismissive. Oh, you must have imagined it. When Ian says that he wants answers, the Doctor doesn't dismiss him or try and gaslight him. Instead, he tries to offer him a more logical, reasoned excuse. And then, not very long after that, when Barbara asks the Doctor basically the same question again, the Doctor not only fails to answer her, but takes Ian by the arm, leads him away from her, and talks to him instead. There's a very clear dismissive attitude towards Barbara and kind of a presumption of authority given by the Doctor towards Ian. So, now this is just the first episode, and like I said, there's not a comprehensive list of incidences like this, but if I can find something in episode 1, look, people who love the First Doctor, there is something here. That having been said, what was done in Twice Upon a Time is way more blatant and is very obviously been ratcheted up to, well, to try and make a point, basically. So And that, I think, there is reason to be upset about that. But I think there is a little bit of a false narrative going on right now, saying it's been created out of whole cloth. It wasn't. There were tendencies there. I can see them. But like I said, way played much bigger in Twice Upon a Time. So it does look like Moffat took something that was there but then went with it. And there's other things that are in a weird nebulous zone, because that smacked bottom line that the Doctor says to Bill, that's actually a direct lift from the classic series. He said that to a woman. But it was also his granddaughter, so it was said in a paternal disciplinary sense, not in a putting a woman in her place sense. So, again, it's a turn of phrase that at the time was fine, but looking back on it is kind of I don't know about that. But then they put it into a new context that made it much more specifically and overtly misogynistic, as opposed to just that was kind of weird. So again, it is building off of something that was present and did exist, but playing it up for more than it was worth. And as someone who, like I said, this didn't hit me right off the bat watching Twice Upon a Time, I do have to kind of give a grant and a certain apology to fans of the First Doctor that I'm sorry I didn't note that. I genuinely am, because I would say you have a right. You have a right to feel whatever you feel. That was a stupid choice of words, but there's something there. There is a relevance to your objection and your anger, even at the degree to which all of this was taken. And for me, even though I still do really like that episode, that is a specific aspect that, I'll be honest, it kind of becomes hard to defend, because I understand why it was done in terms of the point that was being made, except that specific point didn't really feed directly into what was going on in the episode. So I'm not sure it was worth sullying the First Doctor in order to get it across. Now, I suppose it's possible that it could retroactively become more relevant, because I know it's floating out there, and I've seen it in my comments, that there's this notion that somehow Bill is part of the reason that the Doctor regenerated into a woman, or there's even the notion that the Doctor, seeing himself sort of that backwards thinking, has he made a deliberate choice to become a woman instead. But none of that is explicit in Twice Upon a Time itself. So limiting it to the episode, yes, this legitimately becomes a problem. But even expanding beyond the episode itself, it also becomes a bit of a problem, because we now know, we've known for a while that Time Lords can change genders with regeneration, and the Doctor now has as well. And more to the point, the Doctor himself talking it up we don't care about gender. As a society, Time Lords are kind of above that, which, fine, I buy that. Unfortunately, the First Doctor's depiction in Twice Upon a Time doesn't quite square with that, because, granted, he's younger, but also 2,000 years of non-linear time at that. I can't imagine that Time Lord society was that backwards, at the time that the Doctor would have been that much younger, especially for a society that has theoretically been around for as long as the Time Lords have. 2,000 years isn't even that long to them as far as these things go. So how do we have that make sense? Because, like I said, there is a certain degree of it in Classic Who, but to look at the stuff that I was talking about specifically, you could buy, and I'm not sure if I buy this explanation, and I'll explain why in a minute, but for purposes of headcanon, and if nothing else, you could make the argument that the Doctor has this presumption of authority towards Ian and this dismissiveness of Barbara because he's trying to blend in, and because that is how human society is at that specific point in time in which he is there, and he's simply trying to go with the flow or something like that. I don't personally know if I buy it, because in that very first episode, the Doctor is really kind of just dismissive of human civilization as a whole. He seems annoyed with Susan that they're even there in the first place. So that doesn't quite roll with me, with somebody who would have done enough research to do that degree of blending in. He just seems to want to hole up in his TARDIS and just be left alone. But, there's wiggle room there, headcanon wise. I actually think that that's a argument and a possibility that makes slightly more sense with the Doctor at the point that we see him in Twice Upon a Time, because at that point he would have been traveling with humans from what was at that point modern era Earth for so long. He may very well have adopted some of their customs, even if it's not a deep-rooted belief in himself. That may have started to become his default just out of habit, because that's who he's interacting with the most. Much in the same way that I feel at least accounts for why the 10th Doctor acts as human as he does, more so than I think any other Doctor, because it makes sense. He believes Gallifrey to be gone. Earth is kind of his adoptive home. He goes native a little bit. He acts more human the more that he's around them. And especially in the case of the 10th Doctor, the more that he's going to cling to them because his own home is gone. So, springboarding off that, which was something I kind of always already believed, I could buy that the Doctor at the time we see him in Twice Upon a Time, with David Bradley playing him, has possibly just been around humans enough from that time era that he's kind of absorbed that into his, just the way he begins to interact with humans, and is just starting to default to that to a certain extent. Now, even if I go to that place to sort of make it kind of work in my head, is it still overplayed? Yeah. So this is me basically conceding as something of a corrective that, yeah, Twice Upon a Time ultimately is somewhat damaging to the image and the reputation of the First Doctor, to a degree that is somewhat unwarranted. Again, I want to stress, not based in nothing, not invented whole cloth, but certainly pushed harder to make a point that, at least as the episode itself is concerned, I'm not sure is a point that it really needed to make. And the one thing I did say at the time, even though I didn't single out how it may or may not have been sullying the reputation of the First Doctor, I did point out that they kept making that joke a lot, and it was kind of not even funny, but I was kind of fine with it the first time, and then they kept making that joke. Like, that whole aspect was overdone in the first place, and having looked into it a bit more, to understand the anger that I saw from some First Doctor fans, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think you've got a legitimate grievance, and I want to apologize for not giving that its due when I did my actual review of the episode. So those are my thoughts on the depiction of the First Doctor in Twice Upon a Time. What are your thoughts about it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Do all the stuff. Like, subscribe. I'm on Twitter. I got an email, podcast. I got a Patreon. Links for all that stuff is down below. So until next time, this council is adjourned.